Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Book Passage. Thank you for coming out on a gorgeous Saturday and supporting your independent bookstore. We really value when you come out to these events because you're not only supporting the independent spirit, but the wonderful authors we are able to host here. Today, we are so fortunate to have these two exceptionally talented writers here with us at Book Passage, Daniel Handler and Michelle T. Michelle T is a literary force here in the Bay Area.
You're here.
She is the author of 4 memoirs, including the award-winning Valencia and her most recent, How to Grow Up. She has also penned a young adult trilogy, created reading venues, spearheaded the literary imprint Sister Spit, and is the executive director of the nonprofit Radar Productions. Daniel Handler is the author, also known as Lemony Snicket, who mesmerized us with more than a dozen best-selling books in a series of unfortunate events. He followed up with the captivating series All the Wrong Questions and several acclaimed novels, including Why We Broke Up. And now his newest novel, We Are Pirates, is set right here in the Bay Area, and it is fantastic and full of heart and humor and adventure. So with all hands on deck, let's set sail on the high seas with Michelle T.
Hello, everyone. Oh, that's loud.
Hello.
Hello. Hi, Michelle. Thanks for coming.
Hi, Daniel. Thanks for inviting me.
My pleasure.
I'll go anywhere that Daniel invites me to go,
That's
basically.
not a wise policy.
I know, but I'm ready.
We're happy to be here at Book Passage.
Yeah.
It's always a delight.
I just bought my family's weight in children's books.
It's true. Yeah. You have a new baby.
Yeah. So part of that weight was small.
Right.
Just like a
Except you're reading for 2 now.
Totally. He's getting wheeled around here somewhere. His name is Atticus. It's a happy coincidence that it's also a literary name. That's not why we named him that. We just like the name. But it's a great association.
Atticus was the name of the bookstore in the town where I went to college.
Another
So that's
literary
always what I think
connection.
about. Yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah. People would say, like, do you want to go down to Atticus and buy some books? And now they'll say that about your son.
Yeah.
More or less, somewhere.
Steal some
Yeah.
books. Sure.
It's my particular delight to be next to Michelle T because I've been an admirer of her work forever. She is a fierce female, which is always a source of inspiration to me, but a particular source of inspiration for this book. This book started when I was in high school. The idea started when I was in high
No
school.
way. That is so cool.
We had to take a career test my junior year, and it was in 3 phases. Phase 1 was a long list of every possible career, and you had to check off which ones you were interested in. And phase 2 was a psychological test, and they told you which careers you ought to be interested in. And phase 3 was the same list of careers, and you had to check off the ones you were interested in, and they had to see whether they had managed to change your mind. Yeah.
That's weird.
Your tax audit at work.
Totally
It's a
weird.
public school, by the way. So all of you paid for this. And by that 3rd phase, I was feeling disillusioned and disenfranchised from the culture.
Shocking.
And as people are who feel disillusioned and disenfranchised from the culture, I agitated. And I organized my entire homeroom, and we all checked the box that said Other. And in the blank next to Other, we wrote Pirate. Yeah. And I got in trouble, of course.
Was there a consequence? Was there a punishment?
Well, there was yelling, which is kind of the worst. I mean, in my experience, that's the worst part of getting in trouble is the part where you're in trouble. Right? Like once there's an official punishment, you can kind of get through that, but it's kind of the yelling that's terrible.
Especially when you have like people who aren't big with enforcement.
Yeah.
You know.
But my high school, Lowell High School in San Francisco, thank you. Thank you very much. That was an applause line. You're good, very good. That was being used as a statistical sample that year. And so they were going to have to say that 12% of American youth wanted to be pirates. So they were really upset and really angry.
Wow.
Which was a great lesson about statistics and proportions and things for someone in high school.
Yeah.
Now when I think like, oh, 30% of America wants this, I think they just asked 12 people. Yeah, and maybe 4 of them were joking around.
Right,
Yeah.
we're all teenagers.
Right, exactly. But one thing that stuck with me was was that pirate was such an attractive idea. You know, I think if I'd said everybody say welder, no, not everybody would have gone for it.
Yeah.
But there was something so alluring about piracy and about escaping from the world in which you find yourself and trying to be somewhere else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's very romantic.
It is very
Who isn't
romantic.
going to be like, oh, well, I do want to be a pirate, of course.
Yeah.
So, okay.
And then when I finally started the novel, so that was years and years later, of course, but I started studying piracy, and the romance kind of fell away from it, because piracy is actually the history of desperation and the history of who is not welcome on shore. And that was really great to start to think about, that every nation that has practiced piracy, and all of them have, even landlocked nations, fascinating.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I can't go into the whole thing, but it's the history of who isn't welcome, and so some of the earliest transgender history and any circumstances of birth, so-called illegitimacy, and the illegitimacy could be by virtue of marriage or by virtue of racial, you know, cohabitation, all sorts of things. Those were the people most likely to start lurking on the aspects of around the margins of society. And I just found that completely fascinating, that it's almost exactly the opposite of the fantasy of piracy, you know, which is kind of entitlement.
Yeah,
but it's
totally.
actually, it's the opposite. And so when I first started writing this book, I thought, who can I put on a pirate ship? And I thought, let's not put strapping young men on a pirate ship, because we've seen strapping young men on pirate ships before, and good for them, but let's do something else now, which is the theme, I would say, of Sister Spit and Radar Productions.
Oh, yeah.
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 And so the book is dedicated to my sister, because my mind fell upon adolescent girls, and that it might be interesting to put them on a pirate ship instead. And when my sister was an adolescent, she was the angriest person I've ever seen in my life. She wasn't, you know, violent of criminal or anything, but she was furious just all the time. She speaks of it kind of nostalgically now. She says, boy, was I angry. Were you furious adolescent?
Yeah, I was. I was
I'm
pissed.
shocked.
Yeah, I was very upset. I like to get in fights.
Yeah.
Yeah, in the world. With people.
Like ideological
Yeah.
fights or fist
Ideological
fights?
fights that sometimes turn into fist fights.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Sometimes.
I bet you could take me now.
We're
not gonna do that,
Like your
but-
sister is not really angry anymore.
Right.
But you know what, I was thinking as far as like people, you know, pirates not being the people who are kind of like cast out of society, and the other kind of like big person on your boat is the old man with Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
That's super interesting too, because another sort of demographic that people are like over
Well,
there.
early in when I was thinking about the book, I meet a lot of adolescents because of the Snicket books and because of why we broke up and things like that. And I heard a very common complaint when they were at the dawn of smartphones in particular, that I was meeting all these teenagers who were getting smartphones, and I would say naively, boy, you must be excited about your smartphone, because I've sure seen commercials where people your own age are excited about smartphones. Well, actually, people a little older pretending to be people your age. And they said no. And this girl said to me, I can never call my parents and be somewhere else than where I say I am, which is a powerful part of adolescence.
Crucial.
Yeah.
It's crucial to be able to sneak around and be elsewhere.
And I was thinking about that, and then I was at a assisted living center, and I met a man who said, I can never just go and have lunch by myself. And I thought that was more or less the same complaint, and I thought that was quite interesting.
Yeah, totally.
And that a lot of the anger that we see in both those demographics we label as being a product of the age of the time. You know, we say, oh, that's adolescent anger, or we say, oh, well, you know, hey, they're getting up there and then they get angry. And that actually, it seems like quite rational responses to the situations that they're often
Being
forced
controlled
into.
pretty much.
Yeah.
Makes you mad.
It does make
Yeah.
me mad. And it was harder to imagine an older person making the leap to become a pirate. But then my mind fell upon Alzheimer's and dementia, and I thought, well, that would be interesting to have a captain who was kind of escaped from his life just as life was escaping from him. But in the early drafts of the book, I didn't know anything about dementia or Alzheimer's, and the media portrayals of that are particularly and shockingly superficial. Even by the nature of media portrayals of anything, they're pretty superficial. And the early drafts of the book, I could tell I was getting it wrong. It's a terrible feeling.
Yeah, it feels creepy.
Yeah.
What did you do? How did you figure it out then?
I put it aside, which was also upsetting. Have you ever put a book aside? I know you have.
I've put so many books aside.
Yeah.
I put books aside for so long that then the operating system on the computers changed and now I can't open them back up. It's like half written books and I'm like, I'm ready to write that book now, I get it. And I'm like,
You don't have any hard copies?
no. I know, I should, I know,
Yeah.
I know.
So I have hard copies, but I would put it in a drawer, but so you don't have to look at it, but then you have to look at the drawer.
I like literally put it in a drawer.
Yeah. And then, but then you see the drawer all the time.
And then it's all.
It's like the telltale heart, yeah. So you're like, I'll keep the drawer in a piece of furniture that's in another room, and then you see the doorway of the room, and before you know it, you build like a whole castle to hide a book.
Living in the Winchester Mystery House.
Exactly.
Your unfinished novel.
The Winchester Mystery House. But I put it away for a few years, and in those few years, my father received a diagnosis of Alzheimer's and dementia. And suddenly, I had full access, I had full immersion in a story that had previously been denied me.
Whoa.
Yeah, it was very powerful, and it took me a while before I could pick up the book again, because it seemed spooky almost that what had prevented me was now happening.
Yeah.
And but I did, and I finished the book just as my father passed away, and it was a way to feel at peace, even to put. He's not really very much in the book, but the cadences of the disease and the kind of circular reasoning and the circular thought processes that happen are in there. And I also know that there's nothing he would like more than knowing that I was wandering around in libraries and bookstores talking about him that would get a huge kick out of it.
Really?
Yeah.
What was his name?
His name is Lou.
Lou.
Lou Hamner.
Right. Did you ever sail the Seven Seas?
He was in the Navy, but he was hardly ever on a ship. He was an accountant, and he had a gift for numbers, but they don't want you on a ship, they want you on shore doing the books. But his time in the Navy was like a paradise. He went to Hawaii, he was stationed in Hawaii, and he got a convertible and some girls.
What?
Yeah.
That's
He was never very
wild.
explicit about his romantic encounters, but yeah, he got there. Yeah.
My grandfather was in the war in the Navy also, and I remember him just mentioning once about being on the beach in Normandy, and I was young, I was like, oh, you went to France? How was it?
Yeah.
He said, it was a war shell, it wasn't on vacation.
Yeah.
He said, one of like a handful of incredibly significant things. He said, it was a war, it wasn't on vacation.
Yeah.
Your father
I like thinking
at
about
war
that.
on vacation apparently.
It wasn't a war. It was during peacetime. So
Oh, okay.
he was doing nothing.
Nice.
Yeah. And he actually, the way he got stationed in Hawaii is that he went to UCLA, and he heard that if you flew out to DC and you just walked up to an office, they'd send you wherever you wanted to go.
And he did that? It was
Yeah,
true.
which is that's something he taught me, and it's kind of true. In person, you can get a lot more done.
Just in general, in
Yeah.
life.
I think about that all the time when there's kind of electronic hostility out there.
Uh-huh.
I think if we were in the same room, this wouldn't be going on.
I would be asking to speak to your manager right now.
Yeah.
Shall I read about shoplifting?
Yeah, we
Alright.
discovered that both our books have shoplifting in them,
So,
which we don't recommend.
no, certainly not.
That's right. And the owner of the bookstore / queen of San Francisco Bay Area book culture is here. And so we will say that there'll be no shoplifting at
No.
Book Passage today or
No.
any other day.
No, never ever.
So shall it be written, so shall it be
Yeah,
done.
never from any independent bookstore, ever.
No. You know what? I'm going to go on a limb and say even from a chain bookstore.
Even
it's
more
not-
than fine, all right, I'll go sign that for the day.
Yeah.
Or
Were
for
you-
libraries, or,
I was not a shoplifter when I was young.
well, you'll learn soon
Yeah.
that I was.
Right.
Yeah.
I learned already. I've read that book.
Oh, okay.
I recommend that book highly.
As I got to write the reading group guide for that book.
It's true.
It's really, which is like the first time I've ever done such a thing, and it was so fun to be querying the book basically.
Yeah.
You know, it was awesome. So I wrote this book, How to Grow Up. It's a memoir. I've written memoirs before, but I usually try to make them sound like novels. And this is the first book where I kind of was very self-consciously writing a memoir, kind of talking to the audience, being like, hey guys, this is what I did, this is what I've learned. So, so it has a tinge of self-help throughout it, which is funny. Because self-help books are funny, but I also really like them. And this is this little section called The Baddest Buddhist, about being a slacker, fake Buddhist person. And I think I'm just going to start from the beginning, so I don't have to tell you very much about it, except that I do talk a lot about this one relationship I was in and my ex, and we just finished fighting about it, and we're friends again. So that's what happens when you write about.
Muzzle power.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Okay, sometime after my epic breakup, when I was still seething with resentment, I visited my family in sunny Santa Monica. We were among a horde of people wandering toward the promenade, a public space lined with stores and odd, often sad street buskers, like the man playing a violin with an empty soda bottle, or psychic cats, malnourished felines in Red Fair garb, trained to grab a scroll of psychic hoo-ha for a spoonful of wet food. Have you ever seen psychic cats on the Santa Monica promenade? It's worth a vacation. Just to see that. As we pushed forward, I noticed a man in the crowd who was walking funny and spouting fury. Others moved to give him space lest he suddenly become violent. We did the same. As we passed him, I caught a glimpse of his face, reddened, tortured, full of rage. I did everything for you, and you did nothing for me. I did everything for you, and you did nothing for me, he chanted. The people moving by him looked scared or disturbed. Some laughed at him, some looked briefly compassionate and quickly moved on, the various coping mechanisms we developed to deal with the sight of one of our kind losing it in public. Beneath all reactions, even the cruelest, is a bit of there, but for the grace of God go I. That afternoon, I felt especially close to the freaking out gentleman. I couldn't shake the feeling that I had put in a lot of time with my rapper ex, he was a rapper, taken a lot of shit, worked really hard, and all for nothing. I cared for this person emotionally, financially, even physically, and for what? 8 years of my life gone. I did everything for you, and you did nothing for me. The only difference between me and the dude in the street was that I kept my grudging fury on the inside while he had lost that ability. There, but for the grace of Stevie Nicks' higher power, go I. I talk about how my higher power is Stevie Nicks a lot in this book. So anyway, I try to get into Buddhism to calm down a little bit and stop being so resentful. And while the thought of shaving my head is terrifying, I did it once during a feminist nervous breakdown and was shocked to learn I have a very pimply scalp. And vows of silence intimidating, though it would certainly be nice for everyone if I shut up once in a while. And pledging to swear off meat stressful, Buddhism is a spiritual philosophy that has always made the most sense to me. I believe 100% in the truthfulness of it. I believe there's a middle path and it's the sanest one to trot. I believe in the 5 precepts, a scaled-down version of those 10 commandments drilled into me in Catholic school. No killing, no stealing, no sexual misconduct, avoid false speech, and abstain from, quote, fermented drink that causes heedlessness. I find these 5 rules that the Buddhists live by totally fair and much, much harder to abide by than they look. Even the first one, no killing, is more complicated than it appears. At first you're like, Dad, I would never kill anybody. Then you realize that it doesn't say no killing people, it simply says no killing. Now, unlike Christianity, Buddhism is very much figure it out for yourself, which is one of the reasons I dig it. For me, no killing means simply no killing and includes the nation of ants I annihilated on my countertop this morning, not to mention the mouse beneath my sink. If I believe that no killing is the righteous way to go, why do I find it so hard to commit to? Because I'm human, man. If these 5 precepts came easily to any of us, humans wouldn't have been creating religious disciplines around them since the dawn of time. And then I say kind of like touching things about straying and stuff. And now I want to talk about thievery. Though it sounds counterintuitive, I've found the Buddhist precept against stealing easier to master than outright murder, even though I often think a little shoplifting isn't such a big deal. I don't judge any down on their luck person lifting food or toiletries or other human requirements from giant retailers. And I also don't judge the scrappy broke girls I know who have made an art of ripping off fashion from places like Neiman Marcus and Banana Republic. Many a time I wished I had their daring and skill. My own experiences with thievery are so small-scale it's almost embarrassing. When I was 13 years old and began sneaking into Boston, I gravitated to Faneuil Hall Marketplace, a shopping emporium stocked with carts hawking the sorts of juicy trinkets one went wild for in the 1980s. Plastic heart keychains, shoelaces stamped with ice cream cones or shooting stars, rolls of scratch and sniff stickers that reeked of pickles or root beer, dangly purple earrings from a cart that only sold purple things, erasers shaped like unicorns, smallish items easy to pocket if the urge struck you, and the urge did. I coveted these things so powerfully it made me sweat. To me, they were emblems of the world outside my shitty small town, a world where people wore cool clothes and thought cool thoughts and did cool things. If I could bring, say, a purple pencil embossed with metallic gold lightning bolts from Boston back to my real life, it would be like bringing an object back from a dream. It would enchant my everyday hours and infuse them with possibility. So I began to shoplift. I prized my ability to find creative ways to boost an item. Fingerless gloves, very in at the time, were a great aid. I would simply slip palm-sized objects into the gloves and wave at the shopkeeper goodbye as I walked away. I was also good at faking a sneeze while tossing the contraband into my mouth. Chew, and the earrings went in my mouth. At home, I hid my loot in an old cedar box my grandmother had given me. The only problem with stealing such cool stuff is I actually couldn't use any of it. My mother would see it and ask me where it had come from, and I knew my stammer would betray me, so I started selling it. The girls in my shitty Catholic school and my shitty run-down town drooled at the sight of hair barrettes braided with silky ribbons and bright earrings and neon rubber bracelets. The loot vanished from my cedar box, replaced by dollars. I might have gone on forever, slowly building a stolen goods empire. I could be writing to you from prison right now. Instead, I got caught, and the getting caught made me stop my shoplifting ways, about 95% of them. That day, I was wandering the aisles of the Kmart at the crummy Mystic Mall with my friends, up to no good. I wanted watermelon kissing potion so bad. The desire for the taste of sugary candy makeup on my mouth was so strong, I now wonder if I had low blood sugar, or maybe just needed a slice of pizza. But no, I needed my lips to look all wet and shiny like the girl in the ad with the perfect frosted blonde feathered hair. When we hit the cosmetics aisle, I grabbed a package of the roll-on gloss and casually walked into the boys' department. I buried it under a stack of pajamas, and while looking, so I thought, like I was digging around for the perfect size jammies for a little brother I did not have, I ripped the package open and shimmied the tube of gloss into the wrist of my jacket. This jacket was a good one for shoplifting. It belonged to Jen Spicoli, the most popular girl in my class and my own best frenemy. Often I would stay the nights at Jen's house planning the all-pickle health food diets we would go on beneath the posters of Sylvester Stallone that lined her bedroom walls. In the morning, I would be told not to tell anyone that I'd spent the night. It was like we were having an affair, Jen Spicoli and I, though I swear nothing happened between us. I actually sort of hated staying at her house because she slept with the radio on, which I thought was really cool but very much impeded sleeping. I'd lie next to her in bed, having what I now know to be a panic attack. Still, I always wanted to stay over. Jen was cool. She had an older brother who was into AC/DC. She wore black eyeliner. She had the super straight blonde hair pinned back from her forehead, and the softest, tenderest hairs would straggle out from her hairline. Baby bangs, she called them. She wasn't just a member of Chelsea's Pop One or football cheerleading squad. Jen was head cheerleader. And in spite of her ambivalent feelings toward me, she'd let me borrow her cheerleading jacket. It was amazing. Bright red corduroy with her name in cursive on one arm and a patch of the devil on the other. As much as I hated Chelsea, it was cool that the city's mascot was a leering, mustachioed Satan. As a bonus, the wrists of Jen's jacket were tight elastic, meaning that anything stuffed up the sleeve wouldn't fall out. I would have made it home with my watermelon kissing potion if not for the daring of Elena Lubininsky, my own stupidity. Once safely outside the Kmart, huffing and puffing and glowing with the wild dopamine and adrenaline surges shoplifting released in my hormonal body, Elena, who had been too chicken to lift anything, decided she wanted the watermelon-scented eraser that had been packaged with the gloss. I was so excited for my friend that she would soon know the rush and material gain of shoplifting, and I was proud to be her mentor, showing her the ropes. We walked back into the fluorescent-lit apocalypse of Kmart, the stink of fake buttered popcorn and tangy blue ices all around us. We walked back to the pajamas and found the gloss packaging right where I'd left it. Elena snatched the eraser, and then the security guard snatched us. If only I had taken the stupid lip gloss out of my coat and stashed it in a trash can or something. But I hadn't. When the plainclothes guard brought me and a crying Elena into a back room hung with the Polaroids of fellow shoplifters and ordered me to take off Jen's coat, the gloss fell to the floor. The guard didn't put us in handcuffs or call the cops, though he threatened us with both. I managed to convince him that the eraser belonged to Elena and she just had the misfortune of befriending a shoplifter. She was let go and the guard called my mother. I was banned from the store and Jen Spicoli was pissed that I got Kmart arrested in her cheerleading jacket. What if they thought she was me next time she went in for an icy? I looked at her like she was nuts. Jen Spicoli was way prettier than I was. I wish it took but a cheerleading jacket to make me look like her. Nonetheless, Jen became less friend, more Nemi. And that was pretty much the end of that thing, you know? And that was pretty much the end of my criminal career.
Wow. Have you been back to the store, or have you kept with the lifetime ban?
It was really hard. I think I ended up going in with my mom and my sister later on in life.
Right.
You know, the Mystic Mall, it was really called the Mystic Mall in Chelsea. Chelsea's a really rundown place, and the mall kind of went under, and then the Kmart closed down, and now it's actually a mall full of dollar stores. So if you can imagine such a thing, it's kind
Right.
of apocalyptic. It's like all these little dollar stores.
Do you feel like that ban still applies to you, even though it's not the same place?
Like all Kmart's
So like a
everywhere.
permanently cursed ground
Kind of. It is
of your
definitely prescribed.
criminal past?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Well, in some ways, this is a similar story,
Yes,
which is
it
why
is.
I thought it would be interesting to read them both. So, Gwen, who is the heroine of the novel We Are Pirates, is 14. She's very angry, and she ends up teaming up with Errol, a man from a senior assisted living center, and they assemble a ragtag crew, and they steal a boat that has been basically parked at Pier 39. It's a pirate boat where actors are putting on shows as pirates, so it's a real pirate boat. And then they become real pirates, and they sail off to the San Francisco Bay and commit acts of mayhem, which goes poorly pretty quickly.
It's kind of shocking. I was shocked by the book, frankly. I was shocked.
Well,
There were
it's
things I didn't see coming.
part of the theme of the book is that if you decide to leave civilization, you become uncivilized pretty quickly.
Yeah, very quickly.
So you might want to think that through.
There's a lot of morals in what we're reading you today, so.
But how Gwen meets Errol, the older man, is that she's it's a punishment after she shoplifts. She's forced to volunteer, although she doesn't like to call it volunteer because she's being forced to do it, which is the opposite of volunteering. But she's forced to volunteer at a senior assisted living center. But this is when she is shoplifting, which is kind of beginning piracy, I guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
definitely. Landlocked piracy.
Oh, and the first sentence I should say, I was visiting some high schools and I was just starting to write this book, and I said, I was at a high school and I knew I was going to have lunch at the high school at a little table in the corner of the cafeteria, and I said, if anyone here has ever shoplifted and they want to talk to me about it because I'm writing a book in which a girl shoplifts, you can come talk to me. And then I said, but it doesn't mean that anyone who comes talking to me is a shoplifter, because I didn't want anyone to feel self-conscious. So I sat there, and a few people came, but no one had talked about shoplifting. They all had questions about the books and things like that. But then finally, one young woman was sticking around for a while, and so I said, "Do you want to talk about shoplifting?" And she said, "All I know, this is the only thing I know about shoplifting." And she said the first sentence in this section that is now in the book.
It pays to interview teenagers.
Well, I'd like talking to them anyway, so it doesn't feel like research. Well, this is what she said. It's so easy to steal things. Octavia was 14, just like Gwen, but she was taller and prettier than Gwen. She walked forcefully in this long, flared coat, almost a cape, with deep, cavernous pockets and a pair of boots that meant business. Gwen had seen a guy outside the Fillmore, an ancient rock club her dad took her to once with free tickets from work. The jagged gleam of the streetlight shone on a piece of actual metal on the toes of this guy's boots as he looked at her and sneered a little like she was a kid, licked his lips. The boots Octavia wore kicked that guy in the balls. Just like Gwen, Octavia was okay for a long time, and not just when she was a kid. 12 and 13, she was pretty happy. Or naive was the word Octavia thought for it. Then one day boredom just set upon her with a fierceness. There was nothing to do in the condo. She had to get away, but the neighborhood was lame and she wasn't allowed to take the bus alone. Up and down the Embarcadero, the tourists took joke pictures in front of the ugly statues, flying all the way from Japan or Germany to make the same stupid poses everybody made. The cars across the bridge to somewhere fun. Even the ocean seemed to be having a better time, waving and crashing and making cappuccino foam on the pilings. She was mad at the ocean. How stupid was that? Jealous of its schedule and its freedom when she couldn't even get a bus pass. Eventually, she was always at the drugstore. When Octavia was naive, the name drugstore was wrong, because drugs were just one of the things, way in back where the people coughed and waited in cheap chairs. But one day she was old enough to get it. The store was a drug. With the rush, the dizziness, the spending money to do it again, how it messed up your body and made your mind feel cool and false. All the stuff they warned you about with drugs that she was going to find out for herself the second she was allowed to take the bus alone. Her grandfather once said, running an errand with her, "Only in America are there places like this." And now she felt patriotic. She loved to go to the drugstore here in America, land of the free. But it wasn't free the day she had no money. Not a cent. It was Memorial Day, and in this part of America there was a rack of candy bars discounted. It was the land of opportunity, so she took one. It slipped into the deep pocket of her cape, and she spun around on the heels of her pool boots and walked right back out. Tourists were laughing. Maybe it was funny in France. She raced home and hid in the ugliest bathroom to eat it like a wolf with a baby animal, smeared all over her teeth before she thought to look at the calories. Gwen would have thrown it up again, but Octavia just threw the wrapper away and flipped her hair a little. Gwen could not stand it when her father tucked her own hair back behind her own ears without asking. I'll say that one thing that I learned from my sister, it was when she was an adolescent, but I didn't learn it until older, was that my sister was a very skinny and pretty girl, but her doctor taught her how to make herself throw up.
Oh.
Yeah.
That's so dark.
It would have been terrible, of course, no matter what body she had, that I should hastily add. Yeah.
Wow. Crazy.
Yeah.
How was that?
Why are adolescents so angry? I couldn't imagine. It's just the age. It's just the difficult age. She was careful and got better at it quick. The enemy wore red vests, so they were easily spotted, and they were busy stacking cans and ringing people up. The chocolate still flickered in her blood when she went back into the drugstore for another adventure. It was still Memorial Day, and the aisles were quiet. She was methodical, and her method was taking everything and putting it into her pockets. Lipstick and Savage, Scarlet Fever, and Jealous Rage. Barbecue potato chips and red licorice coiled inside a plastic pouch like rope on a ship. A handful of nail polishes. She had to be quick, couldn't choose the colors, and then back around the corner for a bottle of remover. Glitter for her face and neck, batteries she hoped were the right kind, thick pleasing markers, soaked with flowers, actual flowers, forced into it. She remembered suddenly what it was called, shoplifting, and pictured lifting the whole place, the aisles tilting and tumbling their baubles and trinkety treasures into her pockets. Pink razors for her burnt leg, and then she has a burn on her leg. And then a keychain she thought Naomi would like, and when she realized she could steal for other people, it was an avalanche. A chew bone for Toby II, more stuff for Naomi, a stuffed bear and a tiny license plate that said Naomi. 3 flasks of perfume, curvy and shapy like internal organs in her pockets, and she was done with Mother's Day for ages. Her father liked the electronic things, which were behind locked cabinets, but she grabbed a slick stereo magazine and managed to slip it into one of her boots. It would be a way to warm him up for taking the bus by herself. By now she was thirsty and ran a corner to open a fridge and grab an iced tea in a bottle that felt so good in her hands. It was One Universe green tea, which the label said was good for the immune system and for Octavia's skin. No one had stopped her. No one had spoken to her. It was smooth sailing, all for one and one for all. Where does trouble come from? How do you get into it? That first question was something that my son asked when he was very small. He asked me, where does trouble come from? That was a great question. I thought if we found that out, we'd all be in better shape. Where does trouble come from? How do you get into it? It was no trouble to steal any of these things, and the thief was untroubled during the entire easy adventure, her immune system and her skin flushed and glowing. But of course it was a lie. One Universe Green Tea was a soda company in disguise, moving aggressively among young people to get a large share. There was no one in the whole One Universe who was concerned about young girls' immune systems at this time in American history. And the bottle Octavia held was cool and wet from refrigeration, slipping against the sweat on her hands, so when the guard said, "Miss," it shattered on the floor. Instinctively, she knelt down to pick up the pieces, and a razor fell out of her pocket and one of the nail polishes, and the guard reached down. For a moment, Octavia thought he was going to embrace her. She should have kicked him in the balls. But he unbuttoned her cape and held it up as if he wanted to try it on. Several more items clattered into the floor, and then spotted the magazine sticking out of the top of her boot. He took that too and unrolled open, and her heart cut its elevator cables and plummeted to where the chocolate was seething. She had grabbed the wrong magazine. This wasn't the stereo thing. This was Schoolgirls, with girls too old for school dressed up in plaid skirts and terrible pigtails, with their legs open and lollipops in their mouths. The slow tide of tea reached Octavia's knees as the man stood over her in disgust. She had to say something. The guard grabbed her arm by the elbow and wrenched her down the aisle to a door she wasn't supposed to go in. He forced her through a room where 2 guys in red vests were eating noodles they had heated up in little cups. They stared as she dragged by, and the guard dropped her coat on the table, and schoolgirls too. And then the guys grinned at each other and at the magazine and at her. And the guard shoved open another door and pushed her into a seat that was still warm. There was an empty bag of chips identical to the one she had taken, and a peach iced tea, and a bunch of the same markers in a mug with the name of the drugstore on it. It was his chair, the guard's. She looked up at the TV screens. Of course they had cameras. Of course they had been watching her. She couldn't even think of how she thought that wouldn't be so. She had never thought the idea of getting caught was even possible back when she pushed the door into the store 10 minutes ago. Now there was nothing else but getting caught. He slammed the door shut and said something to the guys as his footsteps walked away. Octavia shuddered and her throat felt hot. She grabbed one of the markers and wrote "shit" on the back of her hand, and then when she was done staring at it, did not cry. Over her head, the big square light told her what it thought of this. Flutter, flutter. She wiped her knee and the door opened again. "What's your name?" the guard barked. A man with greasy hair and a white shirt was standing next to him. "Octavia," Octavia said. "Octavia what?" Octavia said, "Needle." She was tired of thinking up things. "You live around here?" She didn't answer. What did it matter? On the television screens, one of the guys was mopping up her mess. "Sure," the guy in the shirt said. "She comes in with her mother, her father, and by herself." She didn't answer that either. "Pretty girl," the guy in the shirt said. The guard reached down and adjusted his belt. Octavia stopped clasping her hands together and put them down, and the two men looked at what she had written on her hand. Gwen said. She couldn't do it. She couldn't even explain why she thought of herself as Octavia during the adventure, but she certainly couldn't do it any longer. Her boots didn't mean business. She wasn't taller or sexier than she was. She was Gwen, and she was in trouble. "Octavia, I could call the police or I could call your parents," the guard said. "Memorial Day," said someone else, one of the guys in vests maybe. Gwen couldn't see. "Stay out of this," said the guy in the shirt. "I'm just saying the cops aren't going to come," said the person who was supposed to stay out of it. The guard adjusted his belt again, which was gross. "Octavia, what is your parents' phone number?" "My dad's at work," said Gwen, but the men just looked at her. Even the guy staying out of it leaned his head in. It was the guy she thought it was. Her father at work was not the answer to what these people wanted from her. She was going to cry, as surely as she was going to get caught. They called her dad Phil Needle, and her dad called her mom, and her mom came and got her out of the drugstore. It had all happened so fast that the tourists were still laughing outside. Not the same ones, but Gwen swore she recognized them anyway. They were all, everyone out there, the same. Thank you. I brought a strange photograph that someone gave me on this tour of three people at on the back it says March 24th, 1975, and it's three people at a place called Parrot Jungle, and they all have parrots on them.
Just
A woman thought I would enjoy that photograph, which I do enjoy it. I didn't enjoy it leaping out though.
That was excellent.
Thank you very much. Yours was excellent.
Thank you.
Yeah, the moral of the story is don't shoplift or you will get caught.
It's terrible. You feel stupid and
Yeah, it's awful.
makes you want to throw up and pass out.
I've never shoplifted really, but I have done this thing, and I will recommend it to no one because you will also get caught. And that is that I have stolen signs from stores or that are posted someplace on airplanes because they're funny to me. And I
Wait,
take
what are you
them and I
talking
give them
about
to
right
people.
now?
Like my best one was in an airport. There was a sign that said alcoholic beverages may only be consumed in the Red Line Lounge. And I thought, obviously, this should belong to me. It was terrible. No one should ever do it.
What happened?
I was caught. Not then, but I was caught at a Sears.
It's darker and darker. Now
Yeah.
we're at Sears.
I was in college and I went to get my dorm fridge. It's very classy. And there were all these signs, and the signs had a template, and the sign said, only at Sears, and then there was a square in the middle, and it would say, and they had different things, like drapes, $35, whatever, only at Sears. and it said only at Sears, and then in the square it said the holiday spirit. And I thought that was marvelous.
You're asking for it.
I was a poet at the time, and I thought I want to participate in the world of poetry and exchange poetry with whoever's writing the poetry here at Sears. And so I bought a refrigerator, and they were going in back to like get the actual refrigerator in the box, not the refrigerator that was there. And I saw the sign, and I took it. And of course, there were cameras there. And so then the man came back, and he had to have this mortifying conversation with me because I just spent money in the store. And he said, "Did you steal a sign?" And I had to say, "Yes, I did." And I had to give it back. I was saying to myself, say that you thought it looked loose or something, say something. But
I thought it came with the fridge.
Yeah, I didn't. And I thought it was the holiday spirit.
Right.
Why don't you, are you anti-Semitic? Why don't you But I returned it, and he was so puzzled that I would steal it, and then I had not a leg to stand on. There was no logic to it. Right? I couldn't say, my baby's starving.
Right. That necessary
Yeah,
kind
come
of
on.
little
Right.
Les Mis sort of stealing.
Right, exactly. It's not a moment from Les Mis. It's a moment from Rent. All I mean is that it was a terrible show, and it cured me, for the most part, of stealing signs. Yeah.
We used to steal when I was in high school also. And I grew up in New England. There was a lot of, it was a very Catholic place I grew up, and there was a lot of lawns, and people like to put statues of the kind of Catholic cast of characters on their lawns. So we would go
Mary,
the
Catholic cast of characters. Like there's so many we can't keep track.
Joseph, so there'd be a Joseph, there'd be a Saint Teresa, Mary's mother. There's a lot. And so we liked to steal them off people's lawns, and then we would try to find creative things to do with them. Like if there was a person we were obsessed with because they were kind of funny, we would steal go out one night, steal maybe 15 Marys, then go to that person's house and put them all on her lawn. So you wake up and there's 15 Marys.
Right.
Or once
Which, if your name was Mary, would be great.
That would be amazing. Yeah. Or if your name was Jesus, and you stole. There's one house had a really big Jesus, too big for us to steal, but we had managed to steal a whole bunch of smaller Jesuses, the same model. So then we put a whole bunch of the little Jesuses around the big Jesus, so they woke up and were like the Jesus.
It was like when Gulliver travels New Testament.
Yeah. We were doing kind of I don't know, we were kind of random acts of kindness in a funny way. If you think about somebody had a Mary whose head was broken off, but they kept her on the lawn, so we replaced it with a new Mary, so maybe they thought it was a miracle.
That's one thing not a lot of people know about Mary, is that you can cut her head off. Yeah. Most moms can do that, actually. Well, it seems a good time to answer any questions that people might have. And then if you have questions, we will answer them, and if you don't, we won't. And then we will sign books, and then we will go home.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes, I heard your interview on NPR. And I want to thank you for your sense of humor. I thought I just found myself laughing at all your remarks.
That's part of a Jewish upbringing, basically.
And a gentleman called in to ask you if you read High Wind in Jamaica. Is that the name of the book?
Yes.
And you said about 100 times, and
I love
you
that
didn't
book.
say why. So I'd like to hear why.
Oh, well, I hope it's for sale here. Richard Hughes's A High Wind in Jamaica. It's a book about some children who get kidnapped by pirates, and they like it. And it's a strange and disturbing British book by Richard Hughes. He was one of those writers where he wrote A High Wind in Jamaica, and he said, "You haven't seen nothing yet. I'm going to work for years on this huge other book that's about everything I want in the world," and he finally finished it, and it's so unbelievably boring, which I feel is a lesson somehow. But it's a great book, and the New York Review of Books put it back into print. I recommend it highly. If you buy only 2 pirate books this year. Yeah. I suddenly realized what I'm supposed to be doing here, so I need to remember. It's okay. Yeah, it's no, we are pirates. Yes, ma'am.
Hi.
Hi.
First of all, I'm about a third of the way through the book, so please don't tell me how it ends.
It's all a dream.
So throughout the book that I've read so far, you make references to at this point in time, or when this time when in Earth, in the
Right.
world when this was happening. I just wonder if you could talk about that a little bit. It's almost like
Yeah.
science fiction a little bit.
I guess a little bit. It happens in a lot of pirate literature. I stole a bunch of sentences and tricks from other pirate books. And a lot of pirate books are written in this strange way where they're trying to correct history, where they say, maybe you've heard about this, but it's all wrong. I'm going to tell you what actually happened. And the sentences are often funny because they'll say something like, at this time in history, they would hang you if they caught you, and nobody wanted to get caught. And I thought, that's probably universally true among all moments in history. There wasn't a time where people were like, hang me or don't hang me. Doesn't matter to me. And that amused me. And also, I think right now we're at a moment where technology is in such terrifying flux that I know a bunch of writers feel like if they begin to write about something, it's going to be obsolete in 2 years. And part of this book is about the constant surveillance that we're under. And I wanted to pinpoint the moment in history a little bit because I'm sure it will get worse before it gets better, we might say. One thing that I loved when I was researching this book was learning that pirates used to work with map makers. They would be in cahoots. So if you were an innocent sailor in town, you would buy a map, and the map would say, look, it's a shortcut, take this way, and it would be an ambush. And I thought how powerful that was, that you would literally making the map of your world, and of course that's not, no one even gives directions to anybody's house anymore, because everybody has a screen in their pockets that'll tell you how to get to Algeria. And I thought that it's so interesting to think about a world that wasn't mapped enough that everybody kind of trusted each other on things, which sometimes proved to be foolish. Now we all trust Google, and it's going to go great. Nothing's ever going to go wrong there. Yes?
I was just wondering, when did you know that you wanted to be a writer?
What did you know?
Oh, but I was very little. I was like really young. I was like, I don't know, 5 or 6. I was trying to write books and write poems and stuff like
Yeah, me too. My parents say, I think this was the NPR person said this, so maybe I'm repeating myself, but my parents say that when I was 5, someone asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up, and I said that I wanted to be an old man who lived on top of a hill giving advice. And if that's true, that was something else I wanted to be, but I don't remember wanting to be that. I only remember wanting to be around literature. Ooh, suddenly everybody has a question. You, ma'am.
I work in the series of unfortunate events, but
Why?
what inspired you to write that?
What inspired me to write that? It's kind of hard because I don't find they're very inspiring books, really. I guess I thought it would be interesting if terrible things happened to children over and over again. You know? Like, you seem nice, but one way that I would definitely remember you for the rest of my life is if right now, out of nowhere, like a cobra came and bit you, and you were screaming, and everybody had to take you away. Then forever I would say, I'll always remember that girl who was in the front row. Boy, that was crazy. Whereas right now, you're not doing anything that memorable. So I think it's interesting when terrible things happen to children. It's also, of course, horrible, but interesting. So the bad news, if you were bitten by a cobra right now, is that it would be painful and maybe you would die or at least have severe medical problems. That's the downside, and that's a huge downside. No one's denying that. But the plus side is that it would be really interesting. It would be an unforgettable day. And in a way, you not getting bit by a cobra is sort of selfish and denying people a totally fascinating afternoon. So, you're kind of terrible. Yes.
You mentioned Lowell High School. Did
Yes.
you grow up in San Francisco? And
I did.
What part?
I grew up near West Portal, Lowell High School, Herbert Hoover Middle School, Commodore Stoughton Elementary School, and a free 1-year experiment with Town School for Boys. I don't like to talk about it. Yes.
You mentioned on your NPR interview, which I enjoyed, that you kind of low-tech in your writing process, and you enjoy Notepad. And and like to get disconnected from technology. I was wondering how you pair this solitary perspective with like who you turn to for feedback, and for this for both of you, when you're looking for creative feedback, who do you trust with opinions on your work, if anyone, and what kind of feedback are you looking for, and what's helpful and what is unhelpful?
Who do you turn to?
If anyone.
You know, I feel a little shy about it. I'm willing to turn it over to whoever kind of asks, but I don't know, I probably should seek advice more than I do. But we had a mutual friend who was doing a salon at one point, and we were bringing our work in progress and reading from that. And that was very helpful. I guess the kind of help that's helpful, the kind of advice is knowing if something's clear or not. Because you can only kind of write the way you can write. I mean, you can always strive to get better, but I always feel like I'm a little bit trapped in my own head and my own reference points and stuff. So you want to make sure that your point's getting across. So people are just like, I don't understand what the hell you're talking about here. That's good. That's helpful.
No.
Yeah.
I asked my wife. She's good. I was going to point her out, but she's left. Well, we had a really solid marriage for a number of years, apparently. Today. But there are a number of single women in the audience, so perhaps we'll not for you. Don't be here's something that I think about advice. I think about definitely advice with my books, but maybe advice in general, is that I feel the people who are giving me advice are like a patient and I'm a doctor. And you know when a patient says, you know, when someone says, my arm hurts, I think it might be a hernia. Like, they don't know if it's a hernia, because they're a patient. But their arm hurts, that part's right. So I think oftentimes people will say, this point in the book here is wrong. You know what I would do? And then I stop listening. But I think that part's wrong.
Right.
You're right about that, but you don't know what you're doing the rest of the time.
Yeah, and nobody can write the book for you.
No. It's sad. Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, for both of you, another process question is possible. You know, you both write with a very distinct voice. Do you remember the point where you felt like you got to that place, like where the sort of your line of demarcation, where it's like, okay, now I'm a writer, and what made the difference for you?
You know, I moved to San Francisco in the early 90s, and there was a lot of poetry open mics, and people were doing kind of confessional poetry, like first person, kind of like, this is my life, and kind of in this sort of like, it's a poem because I said it's a poem kind of way. And I was like, oh, you know, I've been sort of floundering and dabbling in different kinds of writing, and that appealed to me so greatly, and I just started doing it, and there were these people at these open mics just getting up and reading their stuff and being like, I'm a writer. And I'm like, I guess I'm a writer too, you know, and that's kind of what did it, just being able to get out there and just call myself a writer and start taking it more seriously.
I hope it'll happen next year. No, I don't know. I feel like a writer because I've written some books.
Yeah.
But in terms of writing by voice, I feel that's always a challenge. I don't know.
Really?
Yeah.
That's so interesting because you have such a strong voice.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. But I often think writers can never, it feels so different on the inside, you know, like I have so many friends that are writers, and they'll be like, oh, I'm working on this thing and it sucks, it's so stupid, here, I'll read it. And you're like, it's the greatest thing you've ever read in your life. And you're like, it's just, like you don't think you have a voice, and your voice is so distinctive. It's mental illness being a writer. There's a book called The Midnight Disease, and it really is about how being a writer is, you kind of have a mental illness. It's a great book for writers to read.
I don't think I want to know that. I'm trying to forget it right now. Yes.
I'm a copy editor, and I'm wondering how you both are authors with your copy editors. If you're nice, if you're like one of those authors who's like, okay, that's a good idea, I could see doing that, or it's like, no, that comma has to go there, damn it, or something like that.
You know, I actually welcome being copy edited at this point because I don't know anything about grammar. Like, I am so bad with grammar. I can be bad with spelling. Like, I have a story in my head and I get it down, but I'm not necessarily doing it in a way that is the most efficient way to tell the sentence. Like, sometimes I'm shocked that there's an idea that could have been expressed with like 5 words and I expressed it with like 5 lines. You know, and sometimes a copy editor is like, just switch this around a little bit and poof, there you go. And I appreciate that.
I always think they're wrong and then suddenly they're really right.
Yeah.
You know, they say, put a comma here, and I think, you've lost your mind. And then they say, you had this person enter the room twice. And I think, what if that had gone to print? How embarrassing. But one thing that's nice, at least for me with copy editing, is that it comes in the mail and there are all these markings on it.
Yeah.
And so the argument you're having with the copy editor is purely in your imagination. The copy editor has gone on with their life.
Oh, yeah.
And you're saying like, how dare you say that? But they're not saying that at all.
Yeah.
It's like about 99% of the arguments I have are happening imaginarily.
Yeah, I've never met my copy editor. You could have been my copy editor. Were you my copy editor? Yeah. I don't know who these people are.
Once, when there was the same copy editor for most of the volumes of Unfortunate Events, and then she notoriously went to a party and had too much wine. And so, but I wasn't at the party, I never saw her, and I never met her in my life. But so we used to always say like, well, yeah, but who knows what she thought, because she was just full of liquor the whole time. It was just some one random Saturday night. It still was fun to think that the copy editor was constantly tipsy. Yes.
How was the ride through Hollywood, from writer to big Hollywood celebrity, and you're now in a different zone?
When you said how was the ride through Hollywood, all I literally thought was what a pain it is to drive around there. How was it? It was okay. It was long. I worked on the Lemony Snicket movie for 5 years and then I was fired.
Wow.
Yeah. So, and then parts of it were really fun and parts of it were terrible. It was a little humiliating to get fired because they flew me down to Los Angeles to do it.
Oh,
So like, come on down and meet with us. And then you're just there, fired.
Wait, you were writing the screenplay?
Yeah. And so then I went back to the Burbank airport to fly home, and I bought everyone a drink in the Burbank airport bar. I said, I've been fired by Paramount Pictures. Everyone gets a drink. And this one guy said, you know, a few years ago I was fired from Paramount Pictures. And that made me happy. It's a tiny bar, just so you know. It's not really as generous as you might think.
How did that change you as a writer? That whole
Buying
experience?
drinks for everybody?
You drink Tang now?
No, it's fun to write for the movies because it's glamorous and because it's collaborative. And normally I'm all by myself, and so it's fun. But then it's not fun to get fired. I don't know. And then it's collaborative, and the thing with collaboration is that other people get to do their thing. You know, collaboration always sounds great because you think, we'll all work together and we'll all do this. And then when your collaborators say, oh, we have a really dumb idea, then it's too late. They get to do it too because it's collaboration. Oh well.
So how do you feel about the movie now?
I have a policy where I don't see anything mean about a movie that bought me a house. It's the same with people. If you bought me a house, I'll say, I don't care what everybody else says about that girl. I like her. I like her. She's great. There was someone over here. Yes.
My question is, you said that you wrote about a character who had dementia before you even researched it.
Yeah.
Did you think that you might get into trouble because you know nothing about dementia and you were just guessing?
I didn't think I would, but then I realized I was very soon. And so I didn't, and that's usually when I do my research. I do my research when I'm stuck. But I got stuck, and then I didn't know how I was going to do my research because it felt kind of creepy to me to go and volunteer at a place where people had Alzheimer's and be secretly taking notes on them. That felt creepy to me. So many writers do things like that, and I don't begrudge them that, but I felt I couldn't do it. But then what happened with my father, and then I was hanging out with my father, obviously, all the time, and so then it was bonus research. It didn't feel creepy when I was my dad, for whatever reason. Yes?
Why'd you get fired?
A bunch of people got fired. The producer quit and the director was fired, and a bunch of other people involved with the production were fired, and I said, and they said, we're going to start all over, and I said, I don't know if I can start all over, and they said, we were thinking the same thing. We don't think you can start over either. Would you like to ride back to the Burbank airport? See you later. Yeah. Yes.
Yesterday, NPR, you touched on yellow pads, and you also had a couple of comments about cell phones. Do you know what you said?
I write on legal pads a lot, and I really like them. Yellow, I don't care about yellow, but I like for some reason I like the length. It's 8 by 14, I like that. And I don't own a cell phone, which the intern at NPR was so fascinated by. It was just when we were walking in, she said, "Oh, turn off your cell phone," and I said, "I don't have a cell phone," and she said, "How did you?" And I said, "I have a landline at my office," and she's like, like it's connected. Yeah. Because I think when she heard me say I don't have a cell phone, she thought that I was saying I've never talked to another human being. Never done it before.
I must admit, I am a little shocked that you don't have a cell phone.
Yeah. But she was so shocked. And then she told the host of the show, like, "You won't believe it." And so the host said, "So yeah, I heard you have no cell phone." But I don't really have anything to say about it. Because I don't have one. So what's to say? Other people have them, and so sometimes when I want to know what time it is, they just show me. Yes.
I made a series of unfortunate events, and I want to know how you got inspiration for Count Olaf's name.
For Count Olaf's name? That's interesting. Well, I thought that Count part, I thought it would be interesting if he were seemingly a member of royalty, or perhaps pretending to be a member of royalty, because the thing with calling yourself a count is that no one checks. So you can call yourself a duchess for the rest of your life, and people would say, "I wonder how that works." But I can't ask her. Obviously, she's a duchess. Olaf was on a long list of names I wanted to use, and most of the names in a series of unfortunate events are names from other books and from other pieces of literature. And Olaf is the hero of a long Norse saga. Yeah. Kind of a conversation killer in North Saga. Oh look, we have one copy of A High Wind in Jamaica. I expect it to be gone.
We have an idea.
Today.
Great cover.
We have an idea.
This is from our hospice use section, and whatever anyone pays for it goes to patient care at hospice. It is marked $3.
Do we see
No way.
$3.50?
This is the same edition that I had growing up. I really like it. How much would I pay for it? I'll pay $20. Who's higher than $20?
We see $21. Warned by Daniel Hender's hand. You know, it's like.
How's that so shocking violence?
It's like a sort of a weird aura signature. You know what I mean? Like he's not signing it, he's holding it.
Right.
$22.
You get your picture taken with Daniel holding
We got
the book.
23, that's $23. $50. All right. $75 for the hospice.
Yeah.
$75 for hospice.
For $75, not only do you get A High Wind in Jamaica, but you get an afternoon of passion with me.
There is your wife.
Oh, my wife's back in the room. By passion, I mean passionate discussion about literature. Of course. Of course, that's what I mean.
$75 for hospice, warned by the warning.
All right, instead of an afternoon of passion, I will steal you a sign. That's right. I'll return to a life of crime. $75 for hospice. Going once, going twice.
Sign.
All right, it's $50. I have to make the last question be really literary and build to some large psychological point, but you did it with a cheap gimmick. Well, thank you very much for coming. We'll be at this table signing the rest.